Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
People in every part of the globe are perishing because the judgment is low. From children to teens to elderly folks, this epidemic is incredibly bold. Wisdom is needed to see through the fog. Without it, we'll stumble and see to the long. You're jumping without something to break and fall if you choose to ignore it's a beckoning call. The only people who will lose the war are those who don't know who they're fighting for. You are the only one who can decide your fate. Don't waste your life when you can live inside a race. If we turn to God and behold his shining face, we will gain traction to run in this human race.
Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here for The Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And on today's episode, we're discussing the wisdom of socialism.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom.
Check out some exclusive music from Johnsonian Theory.
Tried to say Obama was anti-Americanism because he promoted ideas associated with socialism. But at least he heeds to the pleas and cries of the poor. It's time to challenge the current system and then shake it right down to the core. You may not agree with my politics, but please connect the top to your bottom lip. Joseph McCarthy was on a hunt for socialists just because they spoke about social ownership. You start talking about reformation and next thing you know you're in a police station. Libertarian socialization is seen as the greatest abomination. When you start talking about sharing the profits, next thing you know here come political prophets. They say all is well, but they need to stop it. I wish that they broadcast live from the projects. They're afraid if we regulate the cash flow, we'll end up with another Fidel Castro. They don't understand we're a land of pagans who will elect an actor like Ronald Reagan just to keep up our public persona. If we keep this up, then we'll all be gone. It's better push up when you rush and say Das Madonia. If we keep this up, then we'll all be gone.
Hey, what's going on? JC Johnson here for The Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And you are listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. And this is for The Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. So on today's show, we're talking about the wisdom of socialism. And we're contrasting that with capitalism. All right, so before the break, we looked at a chart which explains some of the differences between capitalism, socialism, communism, and fascism. And just to recap, we looked at how socialism, it has to do with factors of production being owned by everyone. Factors of production are valued for usefulness to people. Allocation is decided by a central plan. And from each according to his ability, this is how things are done, and to each according to his contribution as well. Kind of the whole idea of if you don't work, you don't eat. So we contrasted that with capitalism, where factors of production are owned by individuals. Factors of production are valued for profit. Allocation is decided by supply and demand, and from each according to his market decides what happens. And the last one here was, when it comes to capitalism, to each according to his wealth. This is how things are determined. Whereas with socialism, to each according to his contribution. With communism, to each according to his need. And with fascism, to each according to his value to the nation. And this is the way that it is determined who gets what. That's just a simple breakdown of these differences when it comes to capitalism, socialism, communism, and fascism. And again, if you want to see that chart, go to thebalance.com. That's thebalance.com, and look up the article Capitalism, Its Characteristics with Pros and Cons. Okay, so we are continuing the conversation by looking at another article It's actually located on the same site, thebalance.com, but this article is called Socialism and Its Characteristics, Pros, Cons, Examples, and Types. So this one here says that socialism is an economic system where everyone in society equally owns the factors of production. The ownership is acquired through a democratically elected government. Okay, so on the surface, it all sounds good, right? Everything should be even, no matter how hard one works. It doesn't really matter as long as everyone is doing their part. Everyone is going off of their ability to produce. And there's a central plan, and it's useful to everyone, and everyone is making a contribution. But then, so we see here that there are still, even with that, there are both advantages and disadvantages. And this article goes on to say that some of the advantages of socialism are that under socialism, workers are no longer exploited since they own the means of production. All profits are spread equitably among all workers according to his or her contribution. So it seems like a good thing, right? It's like, hey, if you're contributing this much, then you're going to get this much. The cooperative system realizes that even those who can't work must have their basic needs met for the good of the whole. So that's pretty good, and that's why people were against Barack Obama with Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, because they said, why is it that everyone should get health care and they're not doing anything to contribute? How is that going to help the economy? So people were against that. They said it's not fair that people who aren't making as much contributions as the wealthy, they shouldn't have the same benefits as the wealthy. But those who are in agreement with that say, just because somebody is not able to contribute in the same way as everyone else, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to partake. So that's one of the good things about socialism, is that everyone gets a chance, not just those who are overachievers or who have the best physical strength or abilities. And natural resources are preserved for the good of the whole. So again, it's a way of trying to look out for everyone. It's like, hey, free healthcare, free college, right? Spread the wealth around, spread the knowledge around. Everyone gets a shot. That's the idea of it. And it sounds great. It sounds like a utopia, right? But here are some of the disadvantages of socialism. And this article, I think, does a good job of explaining that. It says the biggest disadvantage of socialism is that it relies on the cooperative nature of humans to work. It negates those within society who are competitive, not cooperative. Competitive people tend to seek ways to overthrow and disrupt society for their own gain. And this is the problem. And this is the problem with a lot of laws that people are not willing to follow. You would think that if the government makes a law, that everyone would just follow it and all would be well, but we know that that's not the case. The reason why alcohol is legal now and it used to be illegal is because people were tired of the aftermath of alcohol being illegal, with having these mafia members and gangsters, people who were not willing to abide by the laws. They took the law into their own hands and basically created their own rules, which led to a lot of people dying, either because they were being killed, because there was competition that was under the radar of the government, and going about things in a way that was not it wasn't regulated, or because maybe they were producing products, like people who were selling alcohol or moonshine. They were selling it in a way that was not FDA approved. It was made with rubbing alcohol and stuff like that, and it was dangerous for people. People were dying because it wasn't being produced properly, because it wasn't being regulated. So there were so many issues with this. And actually, alcohol being illegal even led to so many economic problems, even leading up to the Great Depression, that basically the government went on to say, hey, I think we need to go ahead and make this legal again, because it's more of a headache for alcohol to be illegal than it was back when alcohol was legal. Because the issue that people had when alcohol was legal was that there's so many people who are getting drunk, and a lot of these people that are getting drunk aren't being productive. They're not working. They're beating their wives. They're making poor decisions. We need to get rid of this great evil of alcohol. But they didn't realize that it could actually produce more problems, because people at the end of the day are still going to find a way to get that alcohol, whether it's legal or illegal. And that's why they decided to go ahead and make it legal and regulate it by the government. And the debate is the same now, even with marijuana, right? It's like, do we want street dealers to be selling marijuana, or do we want to make it to where eventually people will be able to buy a value family pack at Walmart? That's the whole thing. Which one is better? That's where the whole debate is. And that's the thing with socialism. People are not, those who are competitive and those who are entrepreneurs, who have that entrepreneur spirit, they're not just going to sit back and allow themselves to be a part of a socialistic society when at heart they're really capitalists. What they're going to end up doing is doing things that are illegal, and ultimately that produces more problems in the country than there were before. So that's the whole debate when it comes to that. But we're going to conclude when we come back. You are listening to North Coast Underground, where the underground starts with you. And I'm JC Johnson, for the love of wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. All right, we'll be right back. All right, what's going on? JC Johnson here, for the love of wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. And on the episode today, we are discussing the wisdom of socialism. On the last episode, we talked about the wisdom of capitalism. So on this one, we're contrasting capitalism with socialism. And I think that this is it's a really interesting topic. It's definitely something that we need to talk more about, because we're living in a society where not only do people have a misunderstanding of what capitalism and socialism is all about, but as a result of that lack of understanding, we're not prepared. It seems as though we're not understanding the type of society that we're actually living in. And one of the advantages of the 2008 presidential election is that it got people thinking about this concept of what is socialism, what is capitalism. It got people talking about something that, people hadn't really discussed for years, since the times of, the Cold War and, eras like that, when it was much more prominent to discuss the pros and cons of one or the other, because people felt like it was life or death. People were afraid, especially during times where people were afraid that communism would potentially take over in the United States. People were afraid of this. They fought against any ideas that seemed communistic or fascist or socialist. But it seems to matter less and less to people now, I think only because people aren't understanding what it's really about. So that's what we're aiming to do today, really just to look at why both socialism and capitalism are important. One is not better than the other. They both have their advantages and their disadvantages. And I want to take a look at what the Bible has to say about this, because I think that it's going to help us to put some things into perspective. One thing that it says here in Acts chapter 2, verses 44 through 46, this is speaking about the first believers, those Jews in Jerusalem who first became Christians, or followers of Christ. And it says here that all the believers stayed together and shared everything. They sold their land and the things they owned. Then they divided the money and gave it to those who needed it. The believers shared a common purpose, and every day they spent much of their time together in the temple area. They also ate together in their homes. They were happy to share their food, and they ate with joyful hearts. So what is this saying? This is saying that they shared everything. And this is something that would be similar to the socialist way of viewing things, because essentially they were individuals who didn't own things as individuals, but factors of production was owned by everyone. Factors of production were not valued for profit, but rather they were valued for usefulness to people. Allocation was not decided by supply and demand as it is with capitalism, but it was decided by a central plan, something that they all agreed to. From each according to his ability, people were able to contribute, and according to their contribution, it really determined what everyone had. And it says that nobody lacked everything, or nobody lacked anything, because everything that they shared had a common purpose. And every day they spent time together, eating together, taking care of each other. If somebody wasn't able to cover their rent, it's not like, well, I'm sorry, you got to be more responsible. No, they said, okay, if you can't cover your rent, we're going to come together and we're going to help you. Maybe we're going to help you with your financial skills, help you get a little bit, better, so that you're not in this situation next month or whatever. But whatever the case, they helped each other. There was no excuse to say, well, it's not my problem. It's not my family. It's not my rent, right? They said, no, your bills are my bills, and vice versa. Ephesians 4:28 says, whoever has been stealing must stop it and start working. They must use their hands for doing something good. Then they will have something to share with those who are poor. And so this here is just saying really that at the end of the day, we have to stop being greedy. Capitalism in and of itself is not bad, but one of the bad things about capitalism is when people start to get greedy, when they start to look at this as a way to exploit other people, to take advantage of other people because they have less money. That's not a good thing. That's one of the things that we have to get away from. But a person doesn't have to be greedy in order to be a successful capitalist. It is possible to value people and to care about people and still be a capitalist, right? So capitalist and good can be in the same sentence. It is possible, but it's just a matter of the motivation that a person has and the way that they view their fellow man. In Luke chapter 3, verse 10 and 11, John the Baptist was asked by his disciples, what should we do? And he answered, if you have 2 shirts, share with someone who does not have one. If you have food, share that too. So basically what he's saying is, you're not supposed to be getting fat, passing out because you ate so much when someone right next to you is starving. No, you need to share. It doesn't mean they get more than what you get, especially if you're the person who produced it, but it's saying that you definitely need to take care of those who are in need. Alright, so more on that next time. You're listening to For the Love of Wisdom, where philosophy meets the streets. JC Johnson, I'm out.
Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If you want it, come and get some. Because we love wisdom. Because we love wisdom. 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 Wisdom.